In financially clever narcissistic people, they may get good at setting up shell companies, moving money to offshore banks, tying it up in some other forms of investment or wealth. People may hide money. They may enable family members who enable them to help them shroud the money as well. A major logistical issue that keeps people stuck in or continuing to enable narcissistic relationships is money. Ultimately, narcissistic relationships are always transactional. They're always trading something for narcissistic supply. And in many cases, it's money or something connected to money. So today I'm going to specifically talk about the issue of financial abuse, which is often a piece of a relational dynamic that is sometimes seen in narcissistic relationships, a larger dynamic called coercive control. So let me actually just set a scene of financial abuse for you. Let's set the scene. Two people meet, a controlling narcissist and an unwitting new partner. They start spending time together. The controlling person, they're a little bit intense, a little bit love-bomby. They offer to pay for everything. They want to spend a lot of time together. It may even feel awkward initially, or not, if there's maybe something soothing about someone taking care of all the costs. But then that new the new unwitting partner gets used to it, and they go with it, and the controlling partner is now paying for everything. And that controlling narcissist may also be controlling in other ways. They'll often ask the new partner, hey, where are you? What are you doing? When are you going to be home? Who are you with? Lots of texting, lots of calls, constant control. And they may also slowly isolate that person, expect that all that money they're spending on this person should translate into all of their new partner's time. Initially, this may be misread by this new partner as interest or intensity, or they're really into me. Time goes on, and the controlling narcissist may even up the ante on the money, perhaps buying bigger ticket items like a car as a gift, or encouraging the new partner to move in with them because, hey, we're already spending so much time together anyhow. Why do you need your own place or living with roommates? Move in with me. It'll all be happening fast. And then the controlling partner starts to go in bigger. Somehow it may culminate in suggesting that the new partner leave their job or their source of income or employment. The narcissist will grandiosely proclaim that, oh, I'll take care of you, and they'll take care of the new partner. In fact, they may even get them a credit card that'll have a limit, of course, or give them an allowance that they control. And initially and over time, many people in these situations will say, gosh, I thought we were on the same page. After we got married, I thought I'd stay home and maintain the house and take care of the family, and my partner will make the money, and then I could ease my partner's stress, and we'd be working together as a team and toward the same goal. Or they'd say, because of this, I could go back to school because I really thought my partner believed in me. The narrative and the rationalization works for a while, and it plays into what can sometimes look, for example, like a classical family structure for so long, right? Until it goes wrong. And with a narcissist, it always goes wrong. And without money, people cannot escape these relationships. And in that way, the financial abuse observed in narcissistic relationships can set up an almost inescapable situation that guarantees that the fragile narcissist will not be abandoned, and then can result in tremendous psychological harm to that unwitting person who is now financially stuck. This sets the scene, and this plays out with people with both lots of money and with people who have very little money. The dollar amounts may vary, but the financial imprisonment is the same. Obviously, these scenarios are much more dangerous for those with less resources because they'll have less options, but imprisonment's imprisonment. Remember that relational control is a hallmark dynamic of narcissistic relationships. They don't like it when they're not in charge of the narrative, and so they control the story using money, coercion, manipulation. A narcissistic relationship isn't about balance or reciprocity or empathy. It's about power and control. Now, narcissistic people often financially abuse other people. They will make promises about money and then they will rescind those promises. For example, they'll say, "Oh, yeah, I'll be happy to give you a loan for your business or tuition for school." And then just when the bill comes due, they no longer want to give it to you. They will often make people financially dependent on them, basically turning their partners into indentured personal assistants, maids, butlers, dinner companions, and sex partners. And they will remind their partners that, hey, I pay for everything. And as part of the devaluation and invalidation we see in these relationships, will call their partner selfish or spoiled for wanting something simple around the house, or for groceries, or maybe even just to get a small holiday or birthday gift for somebody. Financial abuse means that the narcissist will control all of the financial accounts, have all of the passwords, file the taxes, and since too often they're the main source of money, they can move it around as they see fit. They will often manipulate the amount of money their partners have access to, leaving their partner completely reliant on the narcissistic partner for money, shelter, food, everything. The narcissistic person will set it up so that their partners will have to ask for money for even basics and essentials. And trust me, those love bomby days of big dinners out, probably gone. And they will often berate and shame their partners for being wasteful. I've heard stories of multi-millionaire narcissists having their partners practically beg for money for their children's shoes or clothing or doctor's appointments, and screaming and raging when anyone asks them for anything, but then picking up the check for 20 people for dinner. That rage would terrify everyone in the household, so slowly nobody would ask for money anymore, and people were essentially imprisoned in their gilded, or in some cases, their not so gilded cages. Financial control is a key element of coercive control, and it doesn't just happen in intimate relationships. It can happen, for example, in family systems, a family matriarch or patriarch constantly moving around who gets what in terms of money in a will or a trust, or the recognition that in order to benefit from a parent's money, you had to play their game. Or a toxic sibling sidling up to their aging parent and siphoning off money from family accounts and getting control of those finances. Because money is such an essential tool, narcissistic people will weaponize it and use it to control all kinds of relationships. The financial abuse observed in narcissistic relationships is actually a key element of what makes these divorces so horrific. Let's remember, narcissistic people do not like losing control, and least of all, they do not like losing control of their money. And in the divorce process means that they will be asked to hand some of their money over. As a result, these are divorces characterized by manipulation, menace, threats, rage, fear, and lots of shenanigans such as hiding money, turning off electricity and water to the house, refusal to pay spousal or child support, the list goes on. In one trick I've heard many times is that narcissistic people will conveniently lose their jobs during or right after the divorce proceedings and then use that as a way to skirt spousal or child support, and will have often even more conveniently found jobs where they get paid in cash or under the table or through other secret means so they don't have to take care of their now discarded families. Financial abuse becomes a game for them, a cat and mouse game where they get to continue to exert power and dominance. The harms of financial abuse are felt most acutely amongst those who don't have much to start with. The little bit of money a person may use to control another person can mean that there's very little resource or support to figure a way out. And many people in financially abusive narcissistic relationship situations may have been out of the workforce for a while, meaning that they may not be readily employable or have access only to lower paying positions or minimum wage positions that may not provide enough funds to live independently, pay for legal services, or care for children. Financial abuse, especially as seen in a dynamic such as coercive control, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It often occurs alongside other dynamics, such as somebody getting isolated from friends and family, or having cell phones, computers, and other communication activity monitored, because these devices are paid for by the narcissistic person. And that makes the ability to get help even less likely and perhaps at times even dangerous. Money is one of those things that takes the toxic elements, the most toxic elements of these toxic relationships, and makes it worse. And many people who go through this blame themselves for being stupid and naive and for not seeing it. And they blame themselves for quitting their jobs and for allowing themselves to become financially dependent on someone. Don't blame yourself. It's normal and even healthy to view a relationship as a partnership with two people drawing their resources of time and money together for a larger goal. Unfortunately, that shared and equal vision is not a part of the narcissistic relationship. And for many difficult and toxic people out there, just like the car in their driveway or the watch on their arm, they view relationships and people as things that are bought and paid for. Your relationship started out in a way that felt collaborative. So let's just start there. Let's say your partner got a promotion or they had to move. And with the move, they'd get more money, right? So they'd be making enough money for the both of you or your family. And so they'd say to you, you don't need to work anymore. Let's just get the new home set up. Or maybe you got laid off from a job and they think, okay, you know what? You just focus on the household. Or maybe you have children and they say, you know what? Let's save childcare costs. You stay home with the children. Now, perhaps there's been a sprinkling of red flags in your relationship, but you're a couple or you're a family and you're working together for the common good of your future together, right? Well, drop a comment if you already know how this scenario is probably going to play out. So, right, you're in this for the common good. So what do you do if you find yourself financially dependent on the narcissist? Well, the short answer is that you're screwed. Let's break down how this happens. Now, it doesn't happen in 100% of cases, but I'm going about 90%. Because you're screwed, and this can happen for a variety of reasons. And let's list that variety of reasons. Some of these include you're in a narcissistic relationship and you have children, and you opt out of the workplace to care for the children. You get laid off from a job while you're in the narcissistic relationship. The narcissistic partner or the person, encourage you to stop working and focus on the home or the family or to support them in whatever it is they're pursuing. You get sick or injured and you're not able to work. You decide to step out of the workplace to pursue a goal like going back to school or finishing school or starting your own business or finishing a project. Other caregiving responsibilities come up for you, like family members who get sick, and you have to step out of your paid work role. And you taking these responsibilities on make life perhaps easier for the narcissistic person in your life. Now listen, all of these things, it's the stuff that happens. It's the stuff of life. And initially, the narcissistic person will future fake you. And they will tell you, I've got your back financially. And you believe them. Because after all, you're in a relationship with them. It's kind of a financial dependency love bomb. And then, over time, you slowly start to realize you're in a bit of a bad position. Slowly, the narcissistic person may very well start to become contemptuous of you not contributing, despite you likely stepping up on a whole wide variety of other unpaid roles, the entire household, other responsibilities, making their life easier, in many cases turning into a one-stop shop. You're their personal assistant, you're their butler, you're their cook, you're their life coach. You make all the trains run on time. They may triangulate and tell you about the people they work with who are able to do it all, implying that you're not. For example, they may start talking about a person they work with who has children and still works. And yet you believed that that decision for you to stay home with the children and run the household was a collaborative decision, and yet now they're shaming you for it. And then they may really start using money in a punitive manner. You may feel like you have to grovel or find exactly the right moment to get funds or money to get an appliance fixed in the house, or a car repair, or an outfit for a family event. Or you have to steel yourself for any request to be met with really horrible and dismissive comments like, ugh, gosh, someone's a gold digger, or be painted as an undisciplined, selfish spender. They may withhold money to punish you, or may leave you feeling that you have to make biblical decisions, like choosing between something that a child needs and something that is needed for the house. Now, does any of this sound familiar in terms of the financial kinds of structure of your narcissistic relationship? If you feel comfortable, share some of the top notes of your story in the comments below, because again, I think when other people realize they're not alone in this, it helps all of you. It helps all of us. Now, narcissistic people love power and control and dominance and authority within a relationship, and money is a great way to get it. They are often sort of very puppeteering around money. One story I have repeatedly heard from people in long-term narcissistic relationships is a narcissistic partner encouraging the other partner to stop working, usually to make the narcissistic person's life a lot easier, right? They encourage them to stop working, maybe to raise children or take care of a household. Because again, it's all about the convenience for the narcissistic person. But then, perhaps after the children are grown, maybe into adolescence or grown and out of the house, and child's care is no longer needed, or the narcissistic person just wants more money in the household, they will then start criticizing that partner who spent the last 10, 20 years raising kids for not bringing in money. And for some folks, 10 to 15 years out of the workforce can make a return rather difficult. Now, ironically, if you're depending on a narcissistic person for money, it can also activate, oddly enough, a sense of low-grade paranoia in the narcissistic person. Initially, they were the ones who wanted you to stop working and may have encouraged it. That's sort of setting up a power grab. But then they feel like you're taking advantage of them. You can't win. Remember that mantra of all of these relationships. It's a catch-22. They love the power that the money gives them over a partner, but then they feel taken advantage of. Always, you cannot win. The money will also be a sort of self-righteous tool of punishment as well. Things like, oh really? You want to go on vacation? Must be nice that you expect me to work all the time and then expect me to take a break. Where do you think all the money comes from? And honestly, your motivation may simply have been from a loving place. Nothing more than wanting to spend time with your partner or having a family spend time together or give them a break from how hard they're working. And instead, that kind gesture will get painted into you being all about a lazy and selfish waste of time and you not appreciating all that they do. Now, at the most extreme, being dependent on a narcissistic person for money is what is observed in relationships characterized by coercive control. This involves using money as a way to isolate a person, rob them of basic freedoms, and make them fully reliant on the partner who can then control their movements and their access to the world, and who then in turn will control them even further through menace and fear. Without money to be able to get help, people in these coercively controlling relationships are really effectively completely stuck. Now, while many of these dynamics I'm talking about overall, about financial dependency, are most pronounced in a romantic relationship setting, they're also quite often observed in families who may encourage adult children to rely on the family and remain financially dependent and effectively stunted well into adulthood by remaining so financially dependent on parents. And it gives the parent a source of narcissistic supply in perpetuity. It can also happen when people are lured into family businesses or also into startup work situations where it's all sold as all hands on deck and we can't pay you what you deserve, but we'll give you a free place to live or some other perks. But then you find yourself beholden to this structure for the money you need for other things you need to do in life. You may have a free place to live, but you can't afford a haircut. And then you're painted as ungrateful for asking to be compensated at a fair level for your work. Once again, you can't win. To be financially dependent on a narcissistic person is very dangerous. Initially, it may seem like you are entering into a collaborative journey in these relationships. You justify it enough, you start to believe it. And obviously, in healthy relationships, this happens all the time, with everyone contributing to the family in their own way and everyone benefiting. But at the bottom line is, frankly, that all narcissistic relationships are transactional. And once they get tired of your supply, then they will shame you or any person who has become financially dependent on them. Being financially dependent on a narcissistic person is a situation that will always end badly. And interestingly, financial autonomy, having your own source of money, is often what saves people who are stuck in narcissistic relationships. Because when they do decide to sort of call it quits, they actually have more options. And in many ways, the narcissistic folks and their chronic fear of abandonment means like they kind of like being able to trap someone financially so they cannot leave them, and then they manipulate them through shame. That's why it's so important in a narcissistic relationship. You always have your own money. It really is probably one of the only pathways forward to fully survive, get out, and set boundaries in these relationships without a lot of pain. No matter if you make significantly less than the narcissist, try always to keep some income of your own. They may devalue your work, mock you for wasting your time on a lower wage job, and they may try to encourage you to stop wasting your time. Count on me. It's really dangerous, though tempting bait to take, but it may keep you on a psychologically dangerous hook for a very long time. If you are already dependent on them and it is a marital situation, community property, these laws they vary from state to state and country to country. It means working with an attorney and really determining how much you will receive. The most challenging part of this process is not the stuff that gets split at the end of the divorce, a house, whatever, savings accounts, but relying on the longer term payments like spousal support and child support. Those can get to be a real issue, since of all the things narcissistic people hate doing after a divorce, it's paying spousal support. And they may even quit or lose a job to avoid paying you, because spousal support is in part a function of their current sources of income. Now, obviously, these are issues that must be worked out with an attorney, and you need that expertise. And you must consult an attorney if you are caught in a narcissistic divorce that involves any division of assets. This is not an easy thing to do, even simply through mediation. In addition, half of very little is even less than little. So if there isn't much to split to begin with, and you are financially dependent, that can leave you potentially having to depend on other systems, such as family members, to help you out or give you a place to live. And in some cases, they may be narcissistic. And if you have small children, having to do things that are costly, like locating childcare, re-entering the workforce after a long break, securing housing, getting health care benefits, it is all incredibly overwhelming. And because it is overwhelming and sometimes pretty downright impossible, it can often keep people stuck in these relationships. Now, lying and narcissism go together like jam and toast. You can count on them being together. You can count on it happening. And goodness knows, we also have other videos on this channel on narcissistic lying. Narcissistic people lie to preserve their egos. They lie because they want to get away with something. And they lie because they felt they want to get away with something that they felt entitled to do in the first place. They lie because they don't want to be called out. In essence, they lie to make themselves look better than they are. So obviously, when it comes to something as big ticket as money, They lie because it is often the most important thing to them, or at least one of the most important things to them. And they need it. They need it to get admiration, to get validation, to get power, to get all the stuff that keeps them going, feeds that grandiose need to be better than everyone else, and to manage that insecurity. Now, all of that translates into a greater likelihood of them hiding money from you and from other people as well. Now, this dynamic can happen in any number of narcissistic relationship situations. Most commonly, it happens in an intimate relationship, but it can also happen within a family setting or in a workplace situation as well. I am not a money expert, nor am I a grifter, so I am definitely not an expert on how one would hide money. But where I have observed the tendency towards narcissistic money hiding most profoundly is obviously in narcissistic divorces. Once the narcissistic person sees the writing on the wall, and often way before that happens, they start hiding money. Small amounts to start, and then bigger amounts. In financially clever narcissistic people, they may get good at setting up shell companies, moving money to offshore banks, tying it up in some other forms of investment or wealth. People may hide money. They may enable family members who enable them to help them shroud the money as well. I have never understood why narcissistic people get married. They are so weird about money. And marriage, in most parts of the United States, at least where I am, results in something called community property, which means that if the whole thing falls apart, that narcissistic person is going to have to share their money unless the other person makes more. And for a narcissistic person, having to pay spousal support after the marriage is done, or having to fork over what they believe are their personal assets, is akin to ripping their nose off their face without anesthesia. For this reason, people like forensic accountants are often essential in narcissistic divorces when people actually have a decent amount of money. And even then, I tell most of my clients, you could probably set a clock on the idea that this narcissistic person definitely hid some money. Do what you can, but don't waste more time and money and psychological energy trying to make the division of assets fair. The whole thing wasn't fair. The relationship wasn't fair. The whole thing was a mess. And you could waste years fighting this fight and this game of hide and seek around their money, and probably waste even more on legal and other accounting fees. Sometimes people wonder why narcissistic people hide money. Certainly for all of the psychological reasons I already shared, the entitlement and all of that, but also sometimes they do it for practical reasons. Maybe the narcissistic person is having an affair and they're giving money to or spending money on their lover. They know somebody might hide money because they know they want out of the marriage and they're getting their ducks in line. In family situations where money is being hid, they may be aware that the parents are willing to let them control some of the money, and they see an easy pathway in to taking more than their fair share. In a business situation, the narcissistic person sees the business bank account as their own sort of personal slush fund, or they get into debts, bad investment, gambling debts, and they want to take care of them, and they hide the shame without anyone knowing by using these business assets to pay off these other bills that they incurred. These are some of the practical reasons that you might see a narcissistic person, or any person, frankly, hide money as well. Now, as I have noted in other videos in this series, because narcissistic people are so intense and so controlling about money, many times people in relationships with them will pull back and let the narcissistic person manage the money, which then makes it easier for them, the narcissistic person, to hide money. Now, obviously, hiding money happens in other situations as well. For example, a narcissistic sibling may really try to win over or manipulate older parents and start siphoning off and hiding money or taking allocations of money from a family trust or claiming they're being used to help the parents and they're not. A narcissistic business partner may skim and hide cash from the business. The reason they get away with it is this Pollyanna-ish benefit of the doubt, the unseeing, unaware, enably childlike drive to want to believe that people aren't like this. It feels so cynical that to think about narcissism is a rather grim view on human nature. I could sit here all day and share with you the stories of people whose financial future was destroyed permanently by the sleight of hand of a narcissistic person in their life who hid the money, spent it on what they needed for, and then it was gone forever, and they got away with it. Obviously, there's only one real antidote to this, and that is that you need to stay on top of your money or any money that relates to you. In family with shared monies, it's important to ask to see the financial statements regularly. In businesses, if you're in a business setup with someone, don't just offload the bookkeeping and accounting and just forget about it. Pay attention to it. It's a pain in the ass. It takes time, but it is essential. Sometimes you'll see that the narcissistic person in your midst will try to stop you. They'll either rage at you and they'll say, hey, you don't need to look at that. You don't even know what you're looking at. You don't know how to read a balance sheet. Or they'll do the opposite. They will try and appease and manipulate you and say, hey, listen, we have this all under control, and you have such other far more important things to do than waste your time on this silly accounting. Like, your creativity is what you bring to this company. The fact is that if you push financial transparency too much in an intimate relationship with a narcissist or with a business partner, especially if you do this early on, they may cut and run earlier, which is actually great because you just saved yourself a world of hurt. In a family, it may be more complicated since you may have been in that system since childhood. But as everyone gets older and you ask to see the financials early, not even to benefit yourself, but perhaps to make sure your parents are protected, it may guide a greater likelihood of bringing in objective players into this, like trust administrators, while older parents are still mentally in a place where they can get the guidance and a narcissistic family member hasn't already started shaking down the system and getting what they want. The family financial hiding is so much more complicated in this way because it's a system you've always been in. And as life goes on, your parents might want to maintain their autonomy. Money in a narcissistic relationship is all but guaranteed to be a fraught, confused, deceptive, and harmful space. They will hide it, but the question is whether you want your life to be an egg hunt where you have to keep wondering where it is. So if you have any tales of hiding money that happened to you, you feel comfortable sharing them, I think people would benefit from hearing it. But like I said, hiding money by narcissistic folks for their own purposes is a relatively common dynamic. And we're specifically going to talk about a phenomenon that happens with narcissists around money, which is financial shaming. Narcissists are weird about money, and that's what this series really takes on, because it really, again, everything for them is a transaction, so why not? We know very clearly that narcissistic folks are really difficult and frankly quite odd when it comes to money. The stinginess, sometimes being really generous, too generous, abusing people with money, controlling people with money. So, what about shaming people with money or about money? This is a big theme we see in narcissistic relationships. Now, when it comes to narcissism, shame is often part of a larger sort of system of projection. They project their shame and other shortcomings on other people. So, why not this? When it comes to financial shaming, it can take on many different forms, and it has many different functions. So, let's take on the various forms and functions of financial shaming that narcissistic people can engage in. The first is domination and control. And we really took this theme on a lot in the original financial abuse video in the series. Narcissistic people will use money as a way to overpower people. For example, they might do something as petty as buy something so another person can't have it. They make choices that others can't make. They control people through money. Money is such a necessary evil in our lives that the people who have it often hold disproportionate power, and narcissistic people with money will use that money to hold it over other people and get what they want from it, most pointedly, usually narcissistic supply. Life with a narcissist is like living with low-grade extortion all the time. These are entirely transactional relationships, and ultimately, the narcissist just needs supply, and money is a very fast and efficient way to get it. As a result, they will shame people as part of this, like, hey buddy, nice car. I know, I can see that you can't afford the newest one. You want to try mine out to see what it's like? Or shaming someone who can't afford to participate maybe in something, fun thing or something like their family wants to do, and the narcissist coming along like some kind of pseudo-savior, coming along and saying, hey, why don't you join us? You don't want your kids to see that you're not able to make this happen for them? And then, to add the cherry on top, then the narcissistic person will likely drop passive-aggressive barbs, reminding the person that the only reason that they're along for the ride is because the narcissistic person is so nice and so generous. They may use money in the workplace to shame someone who may actually be a better performer and more skilled than the narcissist. But because most workplaces are too slow-witted to understand narcissism and end up advancing the people who have these manipulative personalities, the narcissistic folks may use their higher standing in a company or any institution as a way to control and shame colleagues who actually are better than them, and also a way of showing them who's boss. For example, dangling a raise in front of them, but reminding them that you still report to me. A narcissistic parent may shame an adult child. They may keep giving the adult child money as they need it, but will remind them, well, you never really were able to take care of yourself or make anything of yourself, but we can help you out. I mean, gosh, by your age, I'd already made my first $1 million, but, I'll just keep helping you out. Second, and sort of building on this domination and control piece, is financial shaming as a way of maintaining status. Let's face it, sadly in our culture, we worship billionaires and people of vast wealth. I'm not sure why we do that, but sadly we do. So having money pretty much guarantees status, and status allows a narcissistic person to feel safe, less threatened, and in more control. Status seeking is a primary regulatory tool, self-regulation tool for narcissistic people who are obsessed with hierarchies and being at the top of them. It's not just enough for them to have the status, but they also like to diminish those who don't have as much status as them, and they may do that with money. They may invite people over, for example, to their big, fancy, lavish home, and then toss in tidbits during the conversation, asking unkind questions like, oh, glad you like our house. How's your view? Bet it's nothing like this, huh? Or, how do you manage your large lawn? Oh, I see. Oh, you don't have a lawn? It's a bit of an anatomical swinging contest, and it's not enough to have all the toys and the money, but also to shame those who don't have it, and showing it all off and pretentiously yammering on about it. Because for a narcissist, why have it if he can't use it to shame people? Narcissistic parents may shame a child's occupational choice for no other reason than that it doesn't pay well. A narcissistic friend may shame another friend for not making money and for choosing a job that helps people instead of that one that makes a lot of money and sets themselves up well financially. So much of this is a shaming about things or values or activities that matter to a person because they do not result in the tool of domination, money. And you can't win because if you did make a lot of money, those same narcissistic people who are shaming you would be threatened by you, and they would still find a way to shame you. For example, if you are the one with the sports car, they'd be like, oh, what are you compensating for? The third means of shaming is contempt. And this is interesting. Narcissistic people are actually somewhat uncomfortable when they have to spend time with people who are not as successful or well off as them. You would think that a narcissistic person should be so happy they're with someone who absolutely cannot compete with them, is no threat, that they have totally checkmated this other person in terms of money, power, and status. It's a strange dynamic. When narcissistic people see people who don't have as much, and for some reason, who the hell knows why, a narcissistic person has to be in proximity to this person that they perceive to be lesser, it gets weird. Now, envy plays a big part of this. Envy is a total catch-22 for narcissistic personalities. They either envy people or they assume that people envy them. You can't win. In addition, if the narcissist is spending time with people who don't have as much status as them, their appraisal is like, what's the point? They aren't making what they would consider to be a useful connection. They aren't getting supply from people that they perceive as having high status. So in a way, having to spend time with who they view to be lower status people, especially around money, makes them very uncomfortable. They will often be quite contemptuous. For example, if they have to be with people they consider below them, contemptuous of the surroundings, of the setting, of the people. And much of it will be this snobby discourse around resources, saying things like, I don't know if I want to be seen in a place like this, or who are these people and why are we here? This contempt can also come out in 100 small ways, including mockery of the circumstances or the social station of the people in attendance. And this sort of rolls into the fourth issue, which is a major way that the financial shaming happens, which is plain old-fashioned arrogance and snobbery. Narcissists are snobs, and that is the insecurity. All snobs are insecure. A secure billionaire, if there is such a thing, don't know any billionaires, and I can't imagine many of them are secure, but a secure billionaire knows that they have the money in the bank. And if they were secure and healthy, they could be comfortably with a variety of people without having disdain and contempt for those people. I have to tell you a story. It's interesting. I remember once being at an event where there was a real mix of people at this event because of the nature of the event. And I watched this happen. Someone asked someone, oh, where did you vacation this year? And the person offered up the name of a campground on the New England shoreline. It's absolutely a glorious location, beautiful campground. The narcissistic snob listening, having this conversation said, oh, is that anywhere near such and such? And they provided the name of a very elite enclave that only fancy people vacation in. And the person, the camping person, said, I don't know where that is. It was actually painful and uncomfortable to watch because the person asking about like where this is and what it's near was actually trying to kind of show their disgust and contempt for the person who only had the finances to camp. And the camping person clearly enjoyed the camping trip. Honestly, years ago, I remember being on the receiving end of this kind of narcissistic financial shaming snobbery. Clearly, I am not a snappy or designer brand dresser. I never have been. I'm largely a secondhand or discount store person. It's just, fashion ain't my thing. And I arrived at an event that was full of narcissistic fools. I had gone to this event because it was going to allow me to see really close up some artworks that are not traditionally on display at a local museum, and I was going to be able to get really close to them. Someone I happened to know had an extra ticket they could not use, and they threw it my way, knowing my admiration for this particular museum and these particular pieces of work. When I arrived at this museum, at this event, one of the women in attendance approached me and spoke slowly and loudly. I'm guessing she assumed I didn't speak English, and she said, "Oh, you must be the volunteer to take us on the tour." I was like, sure, okay. So when I said, "No, I'm not," this bitch doubled down and then said, "Oh, yes, I didn't recognize you. You don't live in this part of town, so I wouldn't expect to see you so far from home. And I certainly didn't expect to see you here." "No, you wouldn't, because I couldn't afford to live near you, and the tickets to this thing were like $500. The lovely person who gave the ticket to me ended up being out of town and couldn't make it, so I was really a beneficiary of that happening. Financial shaming is so subtle, isn't it? She didn't come out and say, "Hey, love your Target shoes, and how the hell did you swing the $500 when you live next to the freeway?" Instead, she used so many nonverbals. The dismissiveness. It was sniffy contempt. Now listen, the best part of being a narcissism researcher and studier is that the world is a living laboratory. I guess it would be like being an orchid researcher and living in a rainforest. Now I looked at her. I didn't respond to her. Deep technique: don't defend, don't engage, don't explain, don't personalize. The paintings ended up being absolutely glorious. I was able to talk to the person who worked at the museum to ask about them. I grabbed a handful of their fancy appetizers and left before their dinner began. It would have been too atrocious to be in the midst of these people. I came, I saw what I wanted to see. I felt so fortunate to get to see it. But over the ensuing years, I had contact with this woman, and I watched her do this to other people over the ensuing years. It was very painful to watch the humiliation in their faces as she shamed them too. I have heard of this kind of theme happening in families when one sibling financially succeeds far more than the other. I've heard this happening amongst a group of friends in which, for example, there has been a narcissist that gets into their midst. I've seen this happen in workplace and with couples. The transactional nature of narcissistic relationships can mean that a more well-resourced partner will sometimes, interestingly, choose a partner that is actually financially does not have nearly the resources they have. That way they can control them. But then we'll turn around and shame that partner for not having the resources or not being familiar with their fancy world. You can't win. But this is actually, their financial shaming is actually a really easy weapon to diffuse. Just don't fall for it. No human being, the measure of no human being is their money. Money, I think we all agree, sure as hell makes life easier, but is never the measure of a person. So if you don't get into it with them and make a mental note to steer clear of this person in the future, and don't ooh and on whatever toy they're showing you, and at least avoid anything but the most non-optional encounter like family or work encounter, you can write it off to their inadequacy and their sad need for dominance. It can help you steer clear from a sense of shame and keep it housed where it belongs, in the narcissistic person. And you know what? You can have a little bit of fun with it. When they ask you where your bag is from, you can say, they were giving them away for free at the grocery store. Don't try to out-superficial them. Just keep it real. Because if there's one thing that can slay a narcissist, it's good old-fashioned, honest, authentic truth. Don't let them shame you about your money. Thanks again.